This is the first of a few revision screencasts relating to Much Ado About Nothing, which my Year 11 class are studying as part of the EdXL certificate stroke IGCSE for this year's examinations. These are being produced to help them with their mock exams coming up, but also as they move into the rest of the play and the rest, therefore, of the term. This screencast focuses on themes that can be found in the play, and broadly speaking, I'm identifying 5 of these. The love theme, romantic and courtly love and the tensions between the two. The theme of deceit. The theme of honour. The theme relating to the status of women in society. And the idea of noting that, of course, is central to the play, not only in terms of plot, but of course also in its position in the title of the play, that we are told that that is what this play is about. And of course it's a complex term, and it's a term that will need to be discussed as the... So, starting with love, this idea of romantic and courtly, and what I'm trying to do really is put on the screen questions for students whilst sort of talking over it. It's difficult to think about the romantic love in this piece, mainly because the pair who probably are the most romantic pair in the piece spend half of the play arguing and fighting, and indeed their skirmishes of wit is the central source of humour in much of the early scenes of the play. But we do see very clearly that once the change has begun, once we get beyond Act 3, Scene 1, and the trickery, which we'll talk again about later, we notice very clearly change is happening. As Benedict shifts from his role as this jocular military chap whose only interest in life seems to be bachelorhood, his friendships, the club as it were, which he makes perfectly clear when discussing Claudio and Claudio's approach to Hero in early Act 1. Suddenly, in 3-2, we discover has undergone a change. In fact, he gets mocked for this by his friends. Yes, there is a double edge to their teasing. They're teasing him for falling in love when they know perfectly well that he's only done it because they have lied to him. Nevertheless, the things that we see, the shaving of the beard, the wearing of eyeshadow, the wearing of some form of perfume, even if it is the anal glands of a cat and so on, help to show us a shift in Benedict from warrior to lover poet. And of course, by the end of the play, we see Benedict's half-hearted attempts to sonnetize, and he becomes a significant failure as far as this is concerned. But what we see is the man willing to undergo change for his love. A love that ultimately he proves by being prepared to challenge Claudio to a duel once he is convinced that Beatrice, after they have finally shared the fact that they love each other in Act 4, Scene 1, has convinced him that Hero is innocent and that Claudio has besmirched her honour. Now, the love that this pair have seems to be very different to the love of Hero and Claudio. Yes, it's interesting. Claudio falls in love with Hero at first sight and Hero with Claudio. Obviously, they're enormously attracted to each other. They are young. They're very different to Beatrice and Benedict. Their emotions run near the surface, and ping, they are in love. But from that point on, the only way that Claudio is going to win Hero is by telling his patron, Don Pedro, who outranks Leonato and is able to say to Leonato, "Your daughter, Claudio, make it so." In fact, the language when this is discussed in Act 1 is so clear, and again in Act 2 is so clear, that Pedro only needs to speak to Leonato and you shall have her. It shall be done. Yes, in Act 2, Scene 1, at the masked ball, there is the confusion. People think, Claudio particularly is led to think that Pedro is wooing in his own name, but of course he isn't. He's approaching Hero and saying, "I have somebody who I wish you to marry. Do it." And into that environment of cold, clinical, arranged marriage, we have this rather interesting situation where, because of the fact that Pedro and Claudio are tricked by Don John into believing Hero to be unfaithful, their honour is deemed to be besmirched. Consequently, at the wedding, there is only one way they will behave, and they back Claudio to the hilt. Pedro backs Claudio to the hilt because he has put his name on this marriage and now feels utterly dishonoured by it. The one lovely irony of all this is that when Pedro, it would be strange, when Pedro asks Benedict to marry him, rather than falling down on her knees and agreeing to marry the great man, she simply replies no. He's too fine a suit of clothes, and she will not marry him unless she has a one less fine for ordinary days. His command works to all except for the woman who stands out in this play as a beacon of independent thought, Beatrice. So we've talked about the tricking of Beatrice and Benedict, and we'll come to this in a moment because we now look at deceit. Now, John is deceitful. John is deceitful, and everybody in the audience will know that John is deceitful by the cast list because John is a bastard. As soon as that term is used in an Elizabethan play, the character who is a bastard is deceitful and untrustworthy, and that is it. Now, we have to remember that in terms of the Claudio Hero setup, there are several times that he tries to engage in this deceit to rip them apart. As soon as he hears that there is a wedding due to take place in Act 1, Scene 3, he wants to destroy it. We know he is unpleasant because he tells us so. He is a very shallow character. His only function in this play is to be the person who puts a spanner in the works all the time. I think at this point it's useful if you do a couple of little tasks. Look through the Don John scenes, there are very few of them. Look through the Don John scenes and find a couple of the strongest quotations to show John enjoying the deceit that he is showing, if you like, that he is getting pleasure from what he does. Because I think this pleasure is very important. John is obviously the baddie of this play, but there can be, I think, good deceit in this play, and it is deceit that again gets pleasure for the people practicing it. For Pedro, Leonato, Claudio, Ursula and Hero, it is hilarious the way Beatrice and Benedict fall for their gulling. So there has to be a recognition, if we're writing about deceit, that deceit works both ways. There are essentially two types. Whether we make the change, the difference, if you like, as outcome or intent, I'm not quite sure whether the two can be separated. But it's interesting that the characters in this play that bring the deceit into the play, if you like, are the two brothers, Pedro and John. They arrive from the outside world into Messina, and from that point on, there is deceit. For John, it is the wicked joy that he will take in ruining a wedding, simply to ruin it. But Pedro gets a kick out of his game too. He is very clear that his driving force in life over the next few days is to see Benedict married. Essentially, sort of punishing Benedict, if you like, for his so outspoken praise of bachelorhood. So this is something that links the two brothers very clearly in the way that they are deceivers. Maybe not both evil, but it seems as in the song that we're sung in Act 2, Scene 3, men are deceivers ever. Now, it's all very well being deceivers ever, but this begins to have real weight when we consider how important honour is at this time. This whole play is a series of people bowing to people of higher status. Pedro's arrival is heralded by Leonardo being thrilled to bits that Don Pedro of Aragon should be coming to their house, and even when Pedro simply announces that he's going to stay a month, this is a moment of joy for Leonardo, who is a social climber and sees himself being elevated in this way. We see honour in the various duels that will be charged towards the end of the play, because this theme of honour is of course linked with courtly love. It is indivisible. The people that organise the marriage cannot lose face if the marriage goes wrong. That is why it is so vital for Pedro to maintain the fiction, if you like, although he doesn't realise that it is, of Hero's dishonour. Leonardo attacks his daughter at the wedding in 4-1, wishes she'd never been born, curses her to high heaven after she's already been shamed and abused by Claudio. Why? Because he has been dishonoured. His daughter has brought dishonour upon him. When Benedict challenges Claudio, this is because Benedict is respecting Hero's honour, if you like. She has been dishonoured and he is behaving in the code of gentlemen of the time. You challenge to a duel to restore the honour that has been lost. Because women can't do this. Status of women runs through this play. Hero never speaks out in her defence. In fact, Hero barely ever speaks a word in any scene that she is in when men are present. Interestingly, in the couple of scenes before her wedding, when she is only in the company of women, she's actually quite a dirty and sprightly little thing, talks a great deal, makes a few dirty jokes, and actually rather enjoys herself. But she will not speak in the presence of men. This makes her so different to Beatrice. Beatrice, the woman who is announced at the beginning of the play by interrupting a discussion between men and interrupting it with a filthy joke. It carries on then that she humiliates one of the men in a conversation at cross purposes which he cannot win, before dominating every single scene that she is in. Right up to the end. Once she is married, she is Benedict's possession. He kisses her, saying that he will stop her mouth, Act 5, Scene 4, and she speaks not one word more in the play. Now, you might think this is a coincidence, but are we not being shown this figure who represents in so many ways Elizabeth I being weakened by her marriage? Don't forget, the Queen always refused to marry. I wonder if Shakespeare is pointing a reason why that would be the case. Finally, noting. Noting is a difficult one. Yes, we've all told you, and I will tell you, and all teachers will tell you that it means to notice, to look at something closely, but we have to be aware that there is a sexual innuendo even in noting. In Elizabethan times, the idea of nothing, if you like, the zero, the picture, the hole, if you like, on the page, was a dirty, filthy slang for a vagina. This is a play about sex. Everything in this play revolves around sex. And it shouldn't surprise us, and we shouldn't hide from recognising that because of the title. On a more wholesome note, of course, this whole play hinges on mistakes. You can look at the questions on this slide. This whole play hinges on people not realising what is happening when it's right in front of their eyes. This is a play about errors and about misnoting. Indeed, it's only the friar who seems to get anything right. This has been deliberately quick. This is an overview. This is, if you like, an introduction to thinking about the themes of the play. There will be others, and I'll talk about characters within the play in the same way. I'm not intending to do the work for you. You're going to have to go out and quotation hunt, to make up tables and cross-references and so on and so forth. But I hope somewhere in this quarter of an hour that you've been listening, there have been a few little moments that will remain in your brain as you approach the exam. Thank you very much for listening.